just to give a little background about CodeBuddy, the company, and then kind of how we got to where we're at today. Company's a little over 4 years old. And when we first started, we were doing something that we called micro contracting. So essentially, to provide our mission statement has always been to help people build better software faster. And at the time, the first offering that we did that with was this micro contracting platform. So for engineers who were working at companies writing code, um, basically for tasks that they had in their backlog or have that are somewhat genericizable or somewhat kind of standalone. A lot of the early ones were, connecting to a particular API, external API, or integrating something like Mapbox in the front end. We provided a platform that they could go in and say, I'm working on a task to do this particular outcome. And then we had an AI system that would kind of work with them to drill down on requirements and ultimately come up with formulation for what we called a code kit, which was a standalone prototype that showed them how to do a particular task. Once we kind of figured out what the definition of that was, we would send it out. We have over 10,000 freelancers plugged into that platform. And we basically find an expert in the technology stack and the task and get them to build a code kit for that customer. And we did that for a while, and it was great. And then this thing called ChatGPT or generative AI kind of took the world by storm. And at that point, we really had to, look at not only where we were at the time, but like where's coding going, and how can we use this hugely powerful tool to again serve our mission of helping folks build better software faster. Also around that time, we had some customers starting to ask about, essentially upping the size of the kind of pieces of code that they're looking to get help with. So as opposed to one or two individual tasks, we had customers express interest in getting more standalone. At the time, we used a term called applets, which was just used to kind of delineate small little apps, very purpose built um, for a particular, application. And it was kind of at that time, really a little bit more than a year ago, when we kind of had the idea to build what is now known as Ride. And that's essentially the Ride ecosystem, if you will. There's kind of two major pieces. So there's something that we call the starter kit, and then there is Ride itself, which is the IDE. So the starter kit is essentially it's a repository that is a web application built on React and .NET, uses iDesign architecture. It uses Supabase as a database provider, authentication, uses document database methodology. There's lots of type mapping from the front end and the back end, but there's no features. So it's essentially a repository that represents the best launching pad or a really good launching pad to build essentially any software that can be run in a web application. So browser-based client, and the API runs at this time in Azure. So we built that and validated it with several projects. AI was used kind of throughout the process as well. And then once we had that, it was basically then the next step was to build the IDE itself. And the term IDE is used somewhat loosely, or I'd like to think, I guess, like forward thinking in the sense that most traditional IDEs are more like a text editor where you can open up most, if not all, languages, technologies. Kind of, you can use Visual Studio to write almost anything. You can use Visual Studio Code to write almost anything, and that's where Ride kind of departs from the traditional notion of an IDE. So, excuse me. So the idea with Ride is to create an IDE that is built specifically not only for a single tech stack, but for a single repository architecture. Essentially, it is custom built to build the starter kit into the many real world applications that can be evolved into. And basically, once we made that decision, there's a lot of other kind of bells and whistles and quirks that you can start to facilitate, and basically do the entire project lifecycle from ideation, project launch, cloud tool deployment, allocation, and then making code changes all the way through to deploying those code changes into a publicly available URL.
Yeah. And one of the challenges that we really found when we were talking to customers all the way back to the CodeKit days with microcontracting was, man, I have to be a developer to actually implement this. And we had a bunch of users that weren't as technical. And so that's where the applets really came in. And now we're really finding that if we can build this system that's on Rails that you just described, where you can go from idea to launch following this process using these tools, it's going to, you don't have to be as technical as a full stack developer anymore to launch what was before. And so we're really trying to widen the accessibility of who can use these and who can publish software. And more importantly, who can publish professional level software.
Absolutely. I'll stop there. I'm about to share up and start
Yeah,
getting
let's
into
get
the
into the
actual
demo.
demo.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Um, let's do it. So this is a little bit past the sign up stage, but essentially all that has happened here is you start the IDE up. Part of the startup process is it ensures that all of the dependencies that you need to develop software with Ride are installed. And if they're not installed on your machine, it just self installs them. So, kind of taking that part of the equation out immediately. And then I've created a workspace called CodeBuddy, and that workspace is linked to my Azure subscription. It's linked to my Supabase account, and it's linked to my GitHub. So those are the three external services that at present Ride interacts with and kind of requires that you have accounts with pre-set up. And then, going through that workspace setup it's just simply popping Windows to authenticate with GitHub and Azure and those things. But once you set up a workspace, you get a very simple kind of page here. I've got 4 projects that are currently active, but we'll just go ahead and create a new project just for the sake of demonstration. Craig, do you have anything application wise that you wanna kind of push for an example, or do you want me to come up with something?
An example I thought of was ticketing for either train travel or online booking for something like that.
Sure, let's do that. I like trains. You got a name that you want to give it?
Uh, Today's train world, I guess. Yeah, that's good.
It's gonna ticketing management for trains. All that good. So again, a theme of Ride is to kind of take the technical nitty gritty operations that were previously required for somebody to know in order to even get to the table and be able to start building their own software and just automate them and make it not an issue anymore. So right there, just that quick couple of seconds, we've created a GitHub repository. We've pulled down the starter kit code, renamed it to the appropriate name, pushed it up. So there's a new GitHub repository that exists in my GitHub. And then this process here is going to create a couple of Supabase projects. So also something that's just baked in from the start is the idea of a development and production environment. Again, something that a lot of folks kind of struggle with a little bit if they're newer coders, to kind of set up all that infrastructure in the beginning. So then there's the question of, do I just go without and push directly to production? or is it worth it for me to spend a couple of days or whatever to get a development environment up and going? We take care of that from the start. And then this process, this is actually the longest part of the
Hmm.
uh, project creation process. It can take 3 to 4 minutes, maybe. And what's happening now, we're actually going out and provisioning all the cloud resources, all the Azure static web app and app services for the front end and the back end. And then after that happens, also the system is going and pulling down all of the different secrets and kind of configuration variables from the Azure deployment tokens, the Supabase API keys, the URLs, all of that stuff. Uh, it packages all that up and stores it directly into the project code, so that we'll be able to essentially immediately run the application and have it interacting with those live cloud resources.
Yep. And I do want to stress on how complicated this was beforehand to actually set up each of these. Even just getting your environment set up. I remember I tried to install an IDE on my local machine, and you have to break open the command line to launch certain things. And I was just completely lost. And going through this, I've done the setup now many times as we went through different versions,
Hmm.
and it's amazingly quick. The hardest thing now is actually just creating the accounts to connect to rather than actually setting up your resources, which is a big change, especially when we were doing projects beforehand. Setting up these cloud tools and this stuff was half a day to a day's work just because you wanted to make sure everything was set up the right way. It was connected all the thing, and you'd run into issues because you were doing it by hand. So all of this again just now takes a matter of 5 minutes compared to a day or more.
Yeah, and it's honestly a case too of just like, every developer that's ever spun up a project has gone through this process, and it's not like it's rocket science. It's not like it's impossible. It's just one of those things that you do it one time, and then unless you're planning to do it again at volume, uh, you forget how to do it. There's different things that change all the time, different versions, and so I found myself throughout my career, like every time I would spin up a new project, I was like, man, I feel like I'm just redoing work or relearning things that I've already learned. Um, so again, the idea here is to just take those kind of arbitrary, weird, technical, uh, skills and knowledge that you have to have, and just take it out of the equation, so we can kind of open up the ability to build software to anybody. So extremely good timing, which was planned. Uh, so at this point, our project is completely completely provisioned. There's real cloud resources, a super base. We're essentially ready to go. So you do that and you land on this page. Obviously, there's a few different options, but we kind of want to push people to the idea of planning their first task. And there's a current bug where it's pulling in my last system context. So I'm going to go back and rebuild this. Greg, what is your background and kind of experience with software?
Yeah, so my background's from the project management side, so um, most of it would be interfacing between technical teams and business stakeholders, so teams that are off at different clients that I've been at that are doing this technical stuff. Um, and again, I'll say different levels of um, I'll say the most involved was some data deletion scripts that um, different teams that were at a fintech client that I was at were working on. So some Google Cloud scripts, some stuff with AWS, and some other stuff. But mainly from like taking that and what the business impact of that is. So not really in the weeds with that, but being fed that information and bringing it back from the project side and then bringing that information to some non-technical team leads so they could keep track of where things were heading.
Sure. And then just talk to me a little bit about your interest, I guess, in moving forward in something like this.
Yeah, so I mean, I connected with Tanner. I've done a couple the podcasts with him and some other stuff. So yeah, just I did a UI thing with Devin just to kind of walk through your
Sure.
website back in the fall. So yeah, definitely just kind of have been slightly off
Oh, okay. You
from
did a
that.
usability
So
testing
seeing
on our
that.
marketing site.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Thanks for doing that. That's extremely helpful.
So yeah, I mean, so just kind of have been um I'll say adjacent to a few things here and then
Sure.
um currently in the market for my next project. So had some time. So I reached out to Tanner and was able to connect with him yesterday. So we kind of ran through where some of your recent changes. Um, I'll say like, some, I guess, probably strategic pivots, where you guys are moving forward with this and how you guys are sort of trying to, I don't know if balance is the right word, but determining what level of technical acumen mixed with right, both the what level of technical acumen people need also with, like you said to yourself, where this would fit in the market as there's, changes of AI is coming in, companies have certain things, people have passion projects, etc. So yeah, so just yeah, happy to help out Tanner. So hopped on this and also, you know, told him that I'd give some feedback on how this process, just as you guys dive through the actual logistics of the webinar, because I've done some uh, stuff with that. But no, I mean, I think this is the right forum, as I was telling Tanner, that, a lot of the webinars where you're trying to connect with people seems to have lost their impact in terms of like actually connecting with people
Mm.
virtually. But I think this is one of the types of things where virtually you can really get, the opportunity to show people both on screen what the actual work that you're doing is, and then also be able to answer specific questions that people have um, much better than any, of these sessions that just turn into people talking to one another and not being very helpful. But no, this I think is the right type of forum to get this information out.
Excellent. Sweet. Well, yeah, let's dive in. So this is the first thing kind of that we direct or we try to direct customers to. You start a brand new project. There's really three steps currently involved in the coding process. And this is the first one we internally and in the code it's called system context. So there's three data types in here that we use as kind of a common knowledge between you as the user wanting to build software, and then ultimately the AI that's going to be assisting you in doing that. So these are not even really that specific to AI generated coding. It's just kind of good practice. So uh, three things that we kind of want to nail down when it comes to starting off a new project or continuing a project. Uh, First being workflows,
Hmm.
simple sequential lists of steps that should happen in the software. So in this case, train ticketing, I can see a workflow being, purchase a ticket. I can see a workflow being from the admin side, like add a train run or whatever it's called to be purchased,
Hmm.
add a schedule, um, request a refund, things like that. The second type, pretty simple, just user types. And we already have discussed those in the last 10 seconds. So, from a train ticketing perspective, you're probably going to have a normal customer and you're probably going to have some sort of administrator. And then in any project, software project, there's always vernacular terms that are specific to the domain, and it's really important to just kind of have a ground source of truth um, for those things. So we kind of start people off here with the goal of really just starting to communicate with something that feels like it's a code buddy on your side, very knowledgeable, but also not trying to take the reins away from you and really putting you in the driver's seat as the user. So Craig, I'll put it to you. If you're building a train ticketing system, and you come here and you see kind of an empty screen like this, what's your first thought on what you want to start that off with?
Yeah, so I think my first thought would go to the actual transaction of setting up a workflow for what the happy path would look like to actually have a customer transact and get a ticket.
Mhm. Let's do it. So let's set up a workflow for the most basic transaction in the system, that being a customer purchasing ticket for train, something like that.
Yes.
I had another demo last night, and um, I was we were kind of chatting after the fact that like this page is cool, especially in demos. It's cool to kind of like see the way that it's going to break things down. But as with anything, when it's a hypothetical, we kind of don't care about the details. It's going to ask some questions and get a little bit detailed.
Yeah.
And when it's a hypothetical, we're like, I don't really know. But um, speaking from experience, so Ride builds itself, or rather, we use Ride to build Ride at this point. And when the thing that you're talking about in this view is not a hypothetical example, but rather a real software that you're trying to bring to the world, it is so appreciated
Well, yeah,
the
like
amount of
I'm gonna,
detail.
I can already think about like, being more specific with like refunds and whatnot, but like, from real wide world experience, knowing that people are like, how do we transact with this? How do we get this going? And you can easily forget that minute detail where it's like, be it differential points between different currencies or, limiting what dates people can set a range from when they can purchase, etc. That's where, this stuff gets more challenging.
For sure. Yeah, so put that in. Could you tell me in your own words how the process usually unfolds? Gives an example. Buy the ticket at a station from an agent, online, or perhaps through a mobile app. What are the main steps?
Say select the ticket from a particular location to an end destination for a future date. Select checkout with the appropriate number of tickets for a particular trip. Uh, Select checkout, input contact information, including email address. Um, Select payment options, complete transaction.
All that good?
Yep, let's start with that. Yes, so for that, let's see. The first question is trip. Does that mean a specific scheduled train journey? Yes, that would be a particular train journey from one station to the other. And then for the second one, a ticket would be an emailed PDF, which could be scanned digitally or printed on a hard copy.
Does the sequence look accurate?
Yes.
Cool. So have some conversation with the AI, and then this is a pretty common paradigm throughout the remainder of the application, which is we always want to make the user the center and the sole approving kind of person behind everything that's going on. So whether it's code edits or in this case some first definitions or changes to the system context for the application, this is a pretty common paradigm popping up a window that says, hey, I, as the AI, think that this is the best thing to do next. You can accept it. You can, or say, this is wrong, or also, can you do X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, and this part's been really valuable because even when you're working with human developers, it's so common that there's misunderstandings and definitions and the way things
Well,
are going to
yeah, I
work.
mean, that's
Yeah,
like, I mean,
I'm sure
yeah, I
you've dealt with
mean,
that a ton.
yeah, I mean, the whole thing of you say one word, I mean, even like as simple as like a ticket, and it's like, okay, well, what is this actually, or like a transaction, what does that actually mean? Let alone, a hey, we got to do the refund path. It's just like what terminology? I think that's the key here with this, you
Absolutely.
know, especially when, from from the business stakeholder side, where people say stuff and they're using the terms that oftentimes they see from their perspective, oftentimes as an end user that's downstream, and it's like oftentimes they're not using the right verbiage for this particular thing to get it stood up in terms of the hey, this is the technical stuff that we need to do. So yeah, no, this would be helpful, I think, for um, just to make sure things are on the same page.
Absolutely. I'm going to accept these. And so it's going to work through here. And like I mentioned, the three different data types. We added some definitions, we added a workflow. Don't have any user types yet, but it's going to ask about that next. I'm going to just take some liberties here just for the sake of keeping things moving. We want roles for customer, purchasing a ticket, and an admin serves system. So, yeah, you can spend as long in here or as little as you want. And again, people that are starting up new softwares that they actually care about tend to they love to get in here and get nitty gritty with the AI because they love talking about their own ideas. Um, but we'll move on to the next step, which is given a workflow, which has been added, meaning, we've indicated we want to add this to the system, but there certainly is no code that facilitates this yet. That's something we need to go and plan out and actually implement. So the next portion primarily is still targeted at generally developers or folks that are a little bit more comfortable with kind of these iDesign notions of contracts and accessors and engines and managers. Um, this will pretty shortly be kind of revamped to be primarily AI driven. But at the moment, it's manual and also skippable. So we're just kind of gonna focus in on the user stories here, and then we'll proceed on to like the actual code implementation again, just for the sake of time. But first step is to define some user stories or a user story at least that kind of encapsulates this workflow that we are wanting to facilitate. I'm just going to say here as a customer, I want to be able to purchase a ticket uh, easily without any confusion as to destination, time, etc., so that I can go on a train trip and have fun. Ignore the expanding horizontal weirdness. I'm going to put a pull request in, so that'll be fixed soon. And then criteria and purchase a ticket within 15 minutes, let's say, of uh, coming to the, again, kind of a case where, well, hypothetically, it's like, I don't know, pick some stuff. Um,
Well, yeah, right. I mean, that's the difference between the, example and then something that's, you're more in the weeds on. You would know, the particular time that you want it to be, and then theoretically over time as you would do this, future user stories should probably refine down if 15 minutes, do you need to have something where is this a, is it timely? So do you need to have like a 10-minute clock so people can only have 10 minutes because there's so much desire, or does that only have to be built into certain days? Maybe only Fridays and Saturdays need that, right? Like you can build it out as you get, more into the weeds and know more about your customers.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'll go ahead and add this. I think you're definitely picking up what we're putting down here. And then again, just to kind of give some details, these are actually the real files. So this is the bridge between pure requirements and then starting to plan changes in the actual code. So these are real contracts that already exist in the starter kit. They're kind of basic things that have already been included. But for folks that kind of know pretty deeply what kind of architecture they want to create or update, they can come in here and do that. Add new contracts. Same with things like accessors, engines, views, and components. Um, but again, for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and continue on and say begin implementation. And that lands us here at this is kind of the main bread and butter view of Ride. This is where I spend most of my time implementing code.
Mhm.
And so you can kind of see here off the bat, it looks fairly traditional-ish IDE. You've got a file tree explorer on the left, and you can kind of open up new files and edit them, save them here. Um, we do have this was a throwback all the way from the CodeKit platform. We found that there are certain files that are actually like humans care about in any given code base, and then there's a lot of files that are more boilerplate. And so what we've done here is just create a simple focus mode that really breaks things down and displays them in the most basic kind of categories within the starter kit. But all of that is kind of secondary to this guy over here, which is the chat. And to be quite honest, I spend 95%. I'm sure if there was a heat map on my
Hmm. Yeah, right
vision.
there.
I spend 95% plus of my time right in here. And I don't really write much code anymore, to be honest. So it's a brave new world. So yeah, we'll just we'll go through and make a few edits. And again, just to kind of give you a sense of how this goes. We probably won't get quite through like a full working example. We might. Um, but we said begin implementation on that task. We've got our kind of requirements, descriptions, user stories, and then this AI, which is, again, as I mentioned, been trained on all of the kind of ins and outs of the starter kit, particularly, is ready to rock. Um, so let's see here. New domain concepts. We need some database contracts, some DTOs, managers, front end outline, confirmations needed. So do we want a mock payment or do we want to integrate with Stripe, PDF generation, trip definitions, notification, user account, great plan, start the code updates. Cool. Uh, Give me your thoughts, Craig. What's going through your head right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you're saying, it's not about writing the best code. It's about understanding the prompts and, you know, refining the questions and really understanding what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then that will feed you the code itself. So yeah, I see the use case for this as being, for anyone from someone who has some technical acumen to, people who are coders and are just looking to, do something on the side or whatnot. And this allows them to lean more into that by taking this stuff and refining it to get this information out much quicker than, previously before the technology was there.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. Yeah, I think, you know, as a developer, like I think part of it too, and I actually, funny enough, I was talking to my freshman year college roommate a few weeks ago and just kind of telling him about the product, and he was like, "Dude, you talked about that like our freshman year of college." And I was like, "Did I?" Apparently I did, but um yeah, just that idea that like, I'm a developer and I spend my life building software. But still every time, for example, every time I add a new manager to my software system here, I also have to manually remember to go to the program.cs and to register it in dependency injection. And that's all very technical and whatever, that's fine. But just the idea that like we spend all our time writing software for other folks, but then we still have all these tons and tons and tons of just manually validated processes that are required to know. And so just kind of taking a look inward and saying, like, if we want to build software for ourselves and make the DevX, the developer experience as streamlined as humanly possible, what does that kind of look like? So this popped up. So this is actually, it takes a little bit to run the first time, which is why I started it right when we got here. It has to do an npm install and everything. But this is actually the new project that we just created running locally on our machine. So I'm gonna go and add an account so we can actually log in. Today's train world develop. This is an example. Craig, have you interacted with or familiar with Supabase at all?
I would not really interacted, very, very small amount of interactions of it, more so being downstream of developers who've worked on product inside of it.
Sure. It's I resisted it at first. I was a SQL Server guy. Um, but they've really done an extremely good job of I kind of see them as like they have a similar role in taking, databases and blob storage and authentication and all of the technical nitty gritty that goes into managing all that and obfuscating it all and giving a nice kind of single
Hmm.
pane of glass to be able to do that. So I just went in there and added a user account so that we can log in and this is the software that we just created. Obviously, extremely bare bones homepage. We haven't done anything about actually putting the train, type of functionality in here, but just to kind of demonstrate, um, the basic functionality that comes out of the box. So that being said, uh, let's do something. Let's see, we're at 3:45. Let's do something that we can see impact right away. So I'm just gonna say we'll do that in a minute. But first, I want to change the home page to be something that makes sense for this awesome train ticketing software. So there's a really this we could go a mile deep and honestly that's
Hmm.
probably a good case to start breaking out some webinars on the different pieces of this, back end development with Ride, front end development with Ride, things like that. But just to give a sense of what it looks like to make an edit, just make it static. Let's say just do what you think is best. So another thing here, we try to be pretty transparent about when the AI is kind of reading things and making function calls, what's going on. Again, the user's always the center of this process. And then here again is that familiar paradigm of the AI's decided based on our input that this is an edit that would be worth making. But ultimately, everything's got to be approved by the human. At least that's where we're at now. So we show kind of the side by side diff view. Um, and if we like it, we can accept it. And if not, you can always message Ride to request a change or even wholesale cancel it. So again, kind of making the edit process as streamlined as humanly possible, but without feeling like the AI is editing stuff out from underneath you without knowing what's going on, because that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah, no, I mean yeah, I think especially at this point where things are with AI is the key is where it stands and understanding that, and I think being able to stand for what it's doing, and also I think right as much as it's helpful, also differentiating where the human is still in the loop and why this is a partner that you're using, and it's not totally taking things away, but it's like, hey, this can help you get your idea out there. You still have the knowledge. This is a partner to help you get the idea out there quicker.
Absolutely, 100%. Um, and again, I mean, it's real world development. It's not free of errors or issues or debugging. And again, that's why we wanted to keep this here. That was weird. Is there some sort of weird uh, sensitive data? All right, I'm gonna reset this. Excuse the man behind the curtain.
No, no, no worries.
And we're missing a semicolon.
Mhm.
So you kind of get a sense here of kind of the development experience. Again, there's a number of products out there that they kind of
Mhm.
they basically compromise on this by you know they say like, oh, our users don't ever want to see this sort of thing. And so those are the kind of products that are doing just like total app generation under the hood, and it's easy to make, something that is it. Tanner and I kind of refer to them as toys a little bit. You can build small little web apps that are, completely AI generated, but there's stories in spades of folks that have used those tools, launched a little micro SaaS, and then a month down the line, they're like, my whole code base is messed up, and I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and um, everything like that. So, we try to make the experience as clean and clear as possible without hiding the fact or shying away from the fact that like this is software development. There's going to be errors. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be things that we need to try out and retry.
Yeah, but the AI does a really good job of explaining itself as well. Or you can just ask it questions like, "What it is was it you just did? Can you open these files for me? Can you find these things for me?" All sorts of different stuff like how are you built? That was one of my favorite ones, like to understand the architecture if you're not as technical. So you can really get yourself again up to speed in understanding when something's going. Because yeah, like you said, you can maybe generate something very, very quickly that looks pretty, but the moment that it starts getting additional features and all falls apart, then you just have no idea why it's not working. And so you, it doesn't do you any good.
Yeah. So, and again, this is kind of it's a double-edged sword, picking the first kind of edit to make because folks like to see the front end kind of change. It's very obvious and you see the flash, but really, especially as kind of like a primarily back-end developer, um, where Ride really starts to shine is, and we could go deep and you kind of saw it start to plan out things like contracts and managers, and you
Mhm.
know we maybe we should make this an hour and a half, or maybe we should start at a different point. But kind of given a little bit more time, we could really go dive deep and do a full stack feature, have things stored to the database, based on user input,
Yeah.
and yeah,
If you want to show them as well how easy it is to deploy to the cloud resources, that's something else that's like blew my mind on how quick and easy all those things were.
yes, we'll just go ahead and assume. I assume it's going to pop up here shortly, but um, we'll just go ahead and assume that like we've made some changes that we're good with. Um,
Mhm.
Again, another piece of this puzzle that used to be required to develop software was familiarity with Git, and understanding source control and when do you create a new branch and how do you do pull requests and things like that. At this point, we've essentially just made it, something much more akin to what you would see on a Webflow or other softwares like that.
Mhm.
We're making some changes. Let's give them a name. New welcome view. Then when we do that, we come out here. We have the notion of sessions, is kind of the way that we break it
Okay,
down.
nice, nice. Yeah.
And so, we could either go and we made a set of discrete completed changes. We could either go plan another change, do things that way. We could go back to code, manually make a change, or in this case, first deployment, we're just going to go ahead and deploy.
Mhm.
So again, this is another multi-minute process. It's going to sit here for a second, and then it's going to flip over to another screen where we just get a loading screen until the deployment is complete. But this is using GitHub Actions, a CI/CD pipeline that's already included in the starter kit. Um, and again, all of the different variables that needs of, how does it know what cloud resources, what Azure resources to deploy to, what all the keys are, API, endpoints, everything like that. It's all been taken care of, and you just kind of get to sit here and we do the very stereotypical, maybe potentially cliche, go grab a coffee or get some air. But while that's deploying,
Hmm.
and then you see here again, I mentioned before the built-in kind of notion of test and live, I guess is the terminology
Yeah.
that we landed on. So there's a natural, we basically just walk the user through deploying their changes to test right now. And then when that is complete, they'll basically we'll get a view here that says like your stuff's been pushed to test. Like you can go, excuse me, you can go and test it there, and you can either go and plan another change and push that to test and do that immediately, or this is the one change that we see is on test that's not on live. Would you like to proceed with that deployment process, essentially? What are your thoughts as you're
Yeah,
taking?
no, I mean, I think like what you're describing of how the fact that this doesn't, just pump something out. I think that the person, right, like the people that you're marketing this to are going to want to have some control over it. So I think that that is a great, differential point, and the ability to do that, I think is sort of what you're saying is like, hey, you're involved with this, and it's also a situation where you're not just getting a site out, you're involved along the way, so you have the inputs for it. So you're also learning about what you're pushing through. So by the time it's out there, you've, at least been involved in that loop. So I think that is, that's certainly a differential point and something that is, worth focusing on. I think even like that could, be its own webinar focus, just kind of the value of that and like case studies of pulling in like how people are able to better learn their passion project or idea through using CodeBuddy.
Sure. Here's a, a quick snap of what Ride came up with on an appropriate homepage. Uh, Looks pretty good.
Yeah, and you'd be able to upload your own logos and do all that from Ride, right?
Correct. So, and then the deployment it sometimes takes like up to 10 minutes. So we'll see, especially the first time. And there's a little bit of refractory period, I guess, or
Yeah, we
startup
need to
period.
have some of those turkeys pre-cooked in the oven when we're doing the
Yeah.
demo. But yeah,
Right.
it's a
First one.
really cool system to where again, it's not like you've talked about, it's not like shortening things up just to completely give someone like a wow end result. It's actually giving you the proper development channels, like steps that you need to do to build production grade quality. It's taking out all of those friction points that were extremely manual beforehand and then wrapping it with a AI that can help get you there. And then the other piece that we're going to be doing as well is the actual human code buddy experience where we can do like product and code coaching. So you could set up like monthly, every 2 week or weekly calls or a la carte calls where someone can kind of help get you over the hump or just help you brainstorm, use AI where it's the strongest and use people where they're the strongest. So it will hopefully dramatically increase the success rate of people actually publishing high quality apps.
Yeah, I mean, the fact, right, like the buddy aspect of it, I mean, what I've increasingly been thinking of just from some talks and stuff that I've heard is, you know, first people like, oh, it's a tool, the AI aspect of it. And it's like, well, really, like, this is what you're saying. It's like a buddy. It's really a partner. It should be a partnership of you're using this technology and you're feeding it information, but you're learning through the process and getting
Mhm.
more. And right at the end of the day, if you're refining it, even going through like an initial idea, it should be more refined because you're using this to get, be it, a cleaner, happy path or, a better display for either mobile or desktop view. So, no, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, and it's natural, especially as developers, and when the 24-hour media cycle, gets a lot of mileage out of just hyping up like the potential downsides of AI, right? The Terminator fear has been around since Terminator. But I think, really kind of what we're working on trying to do is demonstrate just by showing how it's not a zero sum game, right? It's not that like for every line of code that we get an AI, that I get an AI to write for me, that my job is that much more threatened or anything like that. It's just like how can we make each developer 10 times more productive?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the whole concept of it's first off, I mean, I think the biggest, the doom and gloom for all of it is like, oh, this is going to take my job. I mean, to me, it's always like, I mean, the jobs like that are around now that weren't around 20 years ago, and right now, like how they're changing. I mean, it's like, yes, this is a technology that can do a lot of stuff, but it's like there still needs to be some sort of human involved. And right, I mean, there's certainly things that should be considered, and it's not like, you know, there's no ramifications of everything, but it's you know, like you said, the media wants to cut everything as a cut and dry. It's either the best thing in the world or it's not the best thing in the world.
Hmm.
When, as I've heard from a lot of places, right, the one thing is like you need to learn this stuff, even if you don't believe in it, is like as powerful as you think, right? It's like you need to at least understand how this technology works because it's going to be everywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think too, part of the thing, it's really easy to forget, you know, but I guess just a story to kind of exemplify, we think like, oh, AI starts writing code, there's going to be no more developers that have jobs. But, we had a customer from Kansas, recently graduated college kid that went through an entrepreneurial program down there, got a little bit of grant money through the state of Kansas, and wanted to start a business, an application that was essentially a social media. Catch my mouse falling off my tray. Is a social media for freshmen to be able to connect at large college campuses. And he went through a whole, the book process with a well-known local dev shop, a multi-week kind of requirements, elicitation, discovery process, planning. And at the end of it, they said, Dane, his name's Dane. Dane, this is, I think it was 8 months. I forget the timeline. It was more than 6 months, and it's $400,000, and that's where we're at. And he looked at that and he said, okay, well, this is dead then. This business that I wanted to start, and I have a little bit of resources for, and I have a business entity and all that, it's just dead in the water because if we're that far off, I'm never going to be able to bridge that gap. And he got connected with Tanner, and we took him through. We were doing some service projects at the time, and took him through the quoting process that we had. And I think the quote that we gave him was like 2 months and $25,000 or something like that. And all of a sudden, this business opportunity or this software work, which in a previous world would have just not existed, all of a sudden becomes a part of the marketplace pool. And so the point of that being like, hey, if we can make software 10x easier to build or 10x faster to build, that also comes with cost reduction. And by reducing the cost, you're bringing into the fold a whole raft of previous software projects that people wanted to do, would have done, but at the time, the economics didn't make sense. You might we might, multiply the amount of software to build by 100 or 1,000. Like there's really no telling.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example, and I mean, I'm sure you guys have the case studies, but yeah, I mean, that is is great to share out. I mean, because I think you're hitting the same point, right? I mean, for me, it's always like coming from the, agile side of the project delivery spaces, it's always like, you get all these people that they refuse to acknowledge that going through something you're going to learn more. It's like
Mm,
inevitable, right? That as time progresses, things are going to change, and there's, the positive change is sometimes overlooked because the negative change is scarier.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the platform. I think it's a really great way for you to learn how to build software because it's not theoretical, it's actual practical, and you're probably going to pick something that you're passionate about and there's some upside to get it right. But the way you really learn is the
By
concrete, like
doing it, yeah.
yeah, this worked, this didn't work. Okay, why didn't it work? And then, figuring that out, finding that solution. So again, I love that the AI can help you do that. You can do traditional research methods, or you can just, again, get a code buddy to help you out to get over those humps. And then once you just keep getting these reps in, things under the belt, then it's just going to get more and more easy. The other thing that I'm really excited about with the platform too is with the starter kit and how it's all set up, you can manage multiple projects within it. And so we feel like there's going to be a whole new wave of developers who can not only build their own stuff, but help others build their projects as well if they don't have the capacity to want to kind of build it, themselves. And so that'll open up a lot of opportunity for more and more software to get built, whether that's for mom and pop shops or you're actually building something for your mom who needs something. It just
Well, that's the
radically is
thing,
going to
right?
increase
Is
it. Yeah.
theoretically, if we look through a lot of the past for these technologies, right, it democratizes, and the smaller players can actually learn more because they are able to be quicker movers. So
yeah.
that's what you would hope again.
Yeah. Devin, our other co-founder, and I were just talking about this morning that like, part of the magic of computers and like the genesis of the internet and things at the time was that it was, it was the everyman's tool, that kind of put everyone on an equal footing, and you as an individual could launch a website and make an impact, and people could go look at your blog. And I think that there's been, a natural capitalist evolution of that since then, and kind of the status quo that we're at today. Most people think of, oh, I'm building software, and that's almost always considered like, okay, you must be doing that to generate profit, right? Yes, there's open source and there's passion projects, but the large majority of software that gets seriously, pursued today is, the goal is to get hundreds and thousands of users on it and to just blow it up exponentially, and that's great. But also, I think there's still a place for using it as, using software as an outlet for creativity, and the more people that we can kind of make capable of doing that, I think, the better off the world's going to be, because everybody has great ideas, and it shouldn't cost $400,000 to even take a shot at something.
Exactly. Yeah.